When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show, and so happy to be broadcasting in much of the country over the iHeartRadio, Bell Media Radio Network. For those of you just tuning in, we normally do this show just for our listeners here in the Montreal listening area, and because it's a holiday Monday, we're taking over. We're trying to be productive and help out the rest of the country. So if you're listening in other parts of Canada, thanks for all your text messages at 71010, letting me know about where you're listening from, getting the notes from Hamilton and near Fort Erie and Paris, Ontario, and Oakville, Ontario. Oh, the great people of Oakville. Shout out to everyone in Oakville as well. Okay, we're going to start off this hour of the program taking a look at bad behavior from Canada's banks. Now, I don't know if you heard this. At the end of last week, TD Bank, right, was hit hard in a historic settlement with U.S. authorities. U.S. authorities saying that TD Bank had lax practices that allowed money laundering to go on. I want you to listen. This is from the big press conference from Attorney General Merrick Garland in the U.S. Listen to what he says about what TD Bank did.
Today, TD Bank pled guilty to multiple felonies, including conspiring to violate the Bank Secrecy Act and commit money laundering. TD Bank has also agreed to a $1.8 billion criminal penalty. Combined with civil enforcement actions announced today by other agencies, the United States will be imposing a total of approximately $3 billion against TD Bank. TD Bank created an environment that allowed financial crime to flourish. By making its services convenient for criminals, it became one. Today, TD Bank became the largest bank in U.S. history to plead guilty to Bank Secrecy Act program failures and the first bank in history to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. This is also the largest ever penalty under the Bank Secrecy Act and the first time the Justice Department has assessed a daily fine against a bank.
So there you have it from Attorney General Merrick Garland saying TD Bank, became a criminal in some of its actions. Let's find out a little bit more. Moshe Lander joins us on the line. He's a senior lecturer in economics at Montreal's Concordia University. Moshe, welcome back to the show.
Hello. Makes you proud to be a Canadian right now, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I guess if we can make it in the U.S. on money laundering, we can make it anywhere on money laundering. But jokes aside, Moshe, what is your reaction to this historic decision?
Well, when you're charged with these crimes, usually in a lot of these cases, it's a lack of oversight. More than anything else. It's that TD isn't doing its due diligence to check who its customers are, where its money is coming from, where its money is going. I think if anybody has ever tried to get a mortgage or any sort of loan in Canada, usually there's a whole bunch of questions, which is where is that money in your account and where did it come from? They ask to see bank statements and things like that. And essentially it's to try and make sure that you're not laundering cash. And so I think what happened here was that TD wasn't asking the right questions, and that was probably in pursuit of growth. These Canadian banks are going to outgrow the Canadian market, and when they expand, maybe they sacrifice some of their normal practices in the name of growth. That's not uncommon for a lot of businesses. It's just this is one business that you can't be lax in.
They've pled guilty here, right? In this case. So because they've pled guilty, I mean, that means they knew it was up, right? They knew what they were doing was wrong. Is that fair to say that?
Probably, but it's also a matter of cost-benefit analysis. If they had said, no, we're not guilty, then this thing could go through any amount of litigation. And if they were ultimately found to be guilty, then the penalties could have been even more severe. So I think if they figured that there's a 50% chance they're going to be found guilty and the penalties would be triple what they were now, they might say, you know what, let's just settle for this rather than drag this out for years and find out that we still could end up in a position where we're guilty. I don't know necessarily that internally they were saying, hey, how do we launder cash for people? This is a great business to be in. They don't seem to have a history of doing that in Canada. So why all of a sudden would they start doing it in the U.S.? It's just that maybe the laws are different in the U.S., that what might not be as requisite in Canada was something that they weren't thinking about when they were instituting their practices of growth in the U.S.
Moshe, do we know how they were doing? So how were criminals using the TD Bank to launder money?
Well, the U.S. has a hit list of countries that you can't do business with, right? So any of the countries that have sanctions like Iran, North Korea, things like that, you can't do business with them. You can't operate the access to the behind-the-scenes banking system that makes banking so easy for us today, where we can deposit and withdraw cash from anywhere around the world. In theory, if you do transactions with countries for which you have sanctions, you are going to be guilty of money laundering, and ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially in the U.S. where that phrase was coined. So in the case of the TD, if you're presented with, hey, you were accepting deposits or allowing money to come through from countries that are sanctioned by the U.S., you are technically guilty at that point. And the fact that you didn't know is not acceptable. You should have known. You should have put practices in place. You should have had questions that were being asked. And so at that point, then, the scale of the amount of transactions, the amount of money that was coming through was just impossible for the TD to say, we didn't know, or we weren't asking those questions. That's why they get hit with a record fine. We're
with Moshe Lander. He's a senior lecturer in economics at Montreal's Concordia University, talking about the TD Bank as they've pled guilty in a historic money laundering case south of the border, $3 billion U.S. in fines there. Moshe, it's not lost on me. Headlines in the last couple of years, right? Banks have been in hot water with Canada's big financial watchdog, right? So FinTrack keeps track of this stuff this side of the border. And just in the last little while, RBC, they failed to report suspicious transactions. They got a $7.5 million fine. $1 million, much less than billions in the case of TD and south of the border. So RBC got that. Similar situation with BMO. Similar thing. Our CIBC failed to report, collect names of international transfers as well. Also got dinged by FinTrack. Again, these are millions of dollars, not billions. Is there something pervasive? Is there some sort of illness in Canadian banking for money laundering?
Yeah, I'm not saying that flippantly, but yeah, probably. I think the nature of the banking industry is that it goes through these cycles where they are always going to try and push the border of what is acceptable, and sometimes they push that border to a point that they cross the line, and they get regulated, and as soon as they get regulated, then within those regulations, it's how do we push that border again to as far as we can. That's always been the nature of it. So there's always this boom and bust, not just within the banking industry, but within banks being caught for various illegal activities. It's the pursuit of profit that drives all of this and incentivizes that. I don't know that we should necessarily say that it's Canada where this happens, but it would never happen anywhere else in the world. It's that when you only have 6 banks and you have a limited amount of growth opportunities within the country, you're going to start looking overseas. And when you start looking overseas, sometimes the people that you get involved with are not exactly the people that you really should be doing business with, but it's just too lucrative to pass up on the profit opportunity that presents itself.
Moshe, does this hurt our listeners? Does it, like, when a bank does this kind of thing, right? And now we've got TD Bank pleading guilty, right? So they pleaded guilty. They did something wrong here. But does it hurt me and you, everyone listening, in our day-to-day, if a bank is doing terrible things, maybe helping out money laundering, does it hurt me as I try and get a mortgage? Does it hurt me if I try and get a loan?
Well, it could hurt you in that if, let's say, you feel strongly about money laundering being a bad practice, do you decide to now move your business away from the TD? If you move your business away from the TD, unfortunately, one of the problems that we have in Canada is that banking is one of those many industries that lacks a lot of competition. And so it's not like you can go farm your business to hundreds of different banks. You've got essentially the big 6 that control 80 to 90% of deposits and loans in this country. So you're probably going to end up in one of those 5. And so given that strengthens the position of the other five, or at least the ones that aren't being fined and found guilty for various crimes, that gives them more pricing power. And so pricing power means that they don't necessarily have to give you the lowest possible interest rate on money when they lend to you, and they don't have to give you the highest possible interest rate on money that you deposit with them. So it could find its way back to you where it makes it harder for you to do business profitably as an individual or as a business. But it's also the type of thing that it could harm you as well, in that they're going to have to recoup $3 billion for their shareholders. And so are they going to find new and creative fees and service charges to impose on its Canadian customers, saying, hey, our American customers don't have to bank with TD, but in Canada, you don't have a lot of choices. And so if you don't like it, go ahead, try and find somebody else. But there's a lot of inertia that governs a lot of the way that Canadians behave. You just stick with your bank because that's what you've done for decades.
Moshe, I've got 1 minute left, and in that minute, I want to ask you about the fact that, Canadian banks and that expansion into the U.S., right? Like RBC, BMO, TD. There's a reason why they go by the letters and not the full name, is because, well, they've got banks in the U.S. and they've got banks in all types of places. How big of a deal is it for Canadian banks to be expanding south of the border?
Well, if they want to pursue profits, they're not going to be able to do it indefinitely in Canada. The Canadian economy is too small. The lure of the American economy, which is 10 times bigger, is too strong. And so you kind of hinted at the line from New York, that if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But if you want to make it somewhere, you have to make it there. And so I think that the Canadian banks are always going to be drawn to the U.S., just like a lot of Canadian businesses. If they want to prove themselves on a global stage, you got to hit the U.S. market.
Should be pointed out that the Bank of Montreal, BMO, is headquartered in Toronto. Moshe, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Happy Thanksgiving. Moshe Lander is a senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University.